Have you ever loved a book just to find out its author did something awful? This is a question that readers grapple with quite often. Can we really separate the author from their work? Hi guys, my name is Chloe and on this channel we talk about all things books. Recently this conversation has resurfaced in light of the allegations against Neil Gaiman, and of course we've had similar discussions about this topic with authors in the past like J.K. Rowling, Orson Scott Card, H.P. Lovecraft and so many more. So today I want to explore what it really means to consume media from problematic authors. Should we feel guilty for still loving them, or does it depend on the situation? Go grab your favourite drink and let's get into it. Let's start with the obvious. If you're watching this video or you're subscribed to my channel, books probably mean a lot to you. They shape our identities, they help us through hard times, and they connect us with other people. So when we find out an author has done or said something harmful, it can definitely feel personal. Almost like a betrayal. Think about that book that you loved growing up. Maybe it was one that got you through a tough time, or a novel that made you feel truly seen, or it was the one that introduced you to your favourite genre. Now imagine finding out that author has expressed views or done something that you strongly disagree with. Do you feel betrayed? Do you reevaluate everything that you once loved about their work? Maybe. A great example of this is of course J.K. Rowling. For many people, Harry Potter was a defining part of their childhood. And then someone gave J.K. Rowling a Twitter platform and let her run wild, making public statements about trans rights, which have caused huge backlash. A lot of her fans were forced to reckon with whether or not they could still enjoy the wizarding world in good conscience. Some have chosen to stop engaging in it completely, whilst others separate their love for the story and its creator. So how do we navigate this? I think there's a few different approaches that people take. There's either a complete boycott, where some readers decide that supporting an author financially or engaging in their work in any form is just not something that they can justify. So they don't want their money, their time or their platform to contribute to anything harmful that this author is promoting. Then there's those who engage with awareness, so others that still enjoy the work but acknowledge the issues. Maybe they borrow books from the library or use their platform to discuss the problems while still appreciating the art. And then there seems to be the category of people who fully separate. So the ones that argue that a book, once published, belongs to the reader, not the author, and they choose to engage with that work as an independent entity without thinking about the creator behind it. One factor that often seems to play into this decision is whether or not the author is still alive. A lot of readers find it easier to engage with works by deceased authors because they no longer profit from their sales. In contrast, buying a book from a living author means directly contributing to their financial success. So in which case, checking out books from the library or buying them from charity shops second-hand allows people to continue to enjoy that work without financially supporting the author themselves, and that seems to be the way that a lot of people go. Now, this is by no means a modern problem. Many classic authors had troubling views. So H.P. Lovecraft was notoriously racist. Agatha Christie included anti-Semitic depictions in her works, and Roald Dahl, beloved children's author, had a very controversial history. And yet their works continue to be widely read and loved. So why does it feel different when contemporary authors are called out? Personally, I think a big part of it is just access to information. We know more about authors today because of social media and constant news cycles. There's also this question of whether or not an author's views actively harm people today. When an author's still living, their words and actions have real-time consequences, which can make it harder to separate them from their work. That said, when we look at books written centuries ago, say in the 17th, 18th or even 19th centuries, it's clear that many authors were a product of the societies that they lived in. Certain ideologies, worldviews and prejudices were widely accepted as the norm, even if today we recognise them as being deeply problematic. At the time, these ideas weren't necessarily seen as controversial, but rather reflections of the dominant culture. That's why reading critically is so important, because whilst we can still appreciate the literary or historical value of older works, we also have the responsibility to acknowledge and challenge some of the more harmful aspects within them. So, for example, Jane Austen's novels reflect gender roles and class structures that were rigidly upheld in her time. Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn use language and racial depictions that modern readers would find offensive. However, when we read these works critically, we can distinguish between what was simply a reflection of the period that they were in and the ideas within those novels which may still hold meaningful lessons today. Understanding historical context doesn't mean excusing harmful ideas. It means recognising how literature evolves alongside society and how we as readers should engage with it thoughtfully. But the question is then, does it make a difference if the problematic content was a product of its time rather than something the author actively promoted? Does an author's redemption arc, if they had one, change how we engage with their work? So, murder mystery novelist Anne Perry was actually herself convicted of murder at the age of 15 and imprisoned for 5 years. Upon her release, she then changed her name and started writing novels about the very thing that she was imprisoned for. And a lot of people today still enjoy her work because she paid her debt to society. Whereas on the other hand, Orson Scott Card, who writes science fiction, is often boycotted because of his very traditional Mormon views about marriage and its condemnation of same-sex relationships, despite the fact that his works actually have nothing to do with his own religious beliefs. So, where do we draw the line? I think it's a really interesting topic. Another very important distinction is the difference between an author expressing their own personal views and writing from the point of view of a character whose views we are meant to dislike and disagree with. A very well written villain or morally grey character might have racist or sexist or otherwise problematic views, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the author themselves endorses it. The problem arises when the line between the author's perspective and the character's views are blurred. So again, another historical example of this is To Kill a Mockingbird. Atticus Finch condemns racism, so it makes it very clear where the book stands on that matter. But in other works, like some of Lovecraft's stories, bigoted views aren't challenged within the narrative. So when an author repeatedly includes these themes within their work but doesn't challenge them or provide a counterpoint, it does raise the question, well, are they just reflecting reality or are they reinforcing these harmful ideologies? And of course, not all problematic behaviour is illegal, but that doesn't mean it's not unethical. So some authors have engaged in actions that, while not criminal, are definitely considered deeply problematic within the literary community. So another modern example of this is the author Kate Corain, who was a debut novelist that was caught review bombing other debut novelists with 1-star reviews on Goodreads. And apart from it being wild that someone even had the audacity to do that, it's incredibly unethical, but not illegal. Then there was the author Susan Meakin, who faked her own death. Yes, you heard that right. She pretended to commit suicide due to online bullying by other authors in an attempt to boost sales for her book. But the kicker was that she continued to release books pretending that she had left notes and manuscripts and it was her family that were writing them for her. And then a few years later she came back from the dead and announced that she was actually still alive, and her family were the ones that pretended to her fans that she died in order to protect her from online trolls. Do with that information what you will. And besides these completely wild and extreme examples, there have been countless examples of authors who have blocked or unfriended or unfollowed reviewers because they've given their books negative or just average reviews. And so while none of these actions are illegal, it definitely severely damages the trust within the reading and writing communities, and it leaves fans and fellow writers questioning people's integrity. I think cases like these raise a very interesting moral dilemma. Is it easier to separate an author when their wrongdoings don't involve criminal activity but are rather just ethical breaches? Or does it still taint our perception of their books? I think at the end of the day, this is a personal choice. There is no universal rule that works for everyone. What matters is being conscious of our decisions and respectful of other people's boundaries. For me, I try to approach each case individually. Some books I've put down for good, others I've chosen to engage with more critically. If you actually watched one of my last videos, the anti-TBR tag, there was actually a question in that asked about problematic authors that I'm no longer interested. And I said in that video, I don't actually know of very many because personally, I try not to look at an author's personal life before picking up their books. Specifically for that reason, because I don't want my preconceived ideas of them as a person to bias my judgment of their work. But I would also love to hear from you, so tell me down in the comments below if learning something about an author has ever changed the way you thought about a book that you loved. Thank you for watching this video, guys, and please don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more bookish content from me. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys!